Sumerians also believed in a Trinity, but theirs was much darker. In fact, their entire creation story was terrifying. And the scariest thing is that we are finding more and more evidence that it might be true. So whether you're religious or not, today's video is going to be an eye-opening one, because we will not just go into the oldest scripture in existence, but we'll also look at modern science and how it backs up the Sumerian story of creation. Now, let's get started. God appearing in three forms is a concept far more ancient than Christianity, and the oldest case of the God trifecta can be traced back to the world's first religion, the Sumerian religion. And its version of the Trinity is at least 4,000 years older than Christianity. Some say that it holds the secrets to our lost history. Others believe that it reveals the true nature of our Creator. Either way, it's a fascinating story, and it starts with Nammu. Nammu was the first goddess, represented by an all-encompassing sea, the sea that existed before the universe and time itself. In total darkness, Nammu gave birth to Enki, which was a combination of heaven and earth. An was the heaven, and Ki was the earth. But they were together as a duality. Then things started proceeding towards the Trinity when Enki, the dual god, created Enlil, god of the sky. Now, the thing about the sky is that it is situated between the heavens and the earth. In other words, the sky separates heaven and earth, and that's exactly what happened in the Sumerian scripture. The sky god Enlil split Enki into Anu and Ki. Anu became the heaven god, and Ki became the goddess of the earth. So we have the god of the heavens, the god of the sky, and the goddess of the earth. But that's not the Sumerian Trinity. The Sumerian Trinity develops after Enlil, the god of the sky, has a child with the goddess of the earth, Ki. This child is named Enki, and he is the god of water and the lord of the entire universe. Now we have the Sumerian Trinity. An, the god of heaven, Enlil, the god of the sky, and Enki, the god of water and life itself. Together, they form the first ever God trifecta. And while it sounds like a very imaginative story, it matches a lot of scientific facts. Anu is a single god that carries all creation in one single unit. The Big Bang Theory suggests that the universe burst into existence from an extremely dense point called the singularity, which was smaller than a single atom. With that in mind, Enki's birth from the primordial sea sounds like a very accurate metaphor for how the universe came into existence. It's also interesting that the first thing created by Enki, or the singularity, is the sky god Enlil. And what's the first thing created by the Big Bang? Gas. For the first billion years of the universe's existence, it was mostly gas, or you could say, sky god Enlil. And what does Enlil do? He splits the heaven-earth duality, creating two different entities, Anu, the heaven god, and Ki, the earth goddess. Now look at what happens in the scientific version. After a billion years, dust is separated from space and is bound by gravity into stars, planets, and galaxies. Basically, planets and space are separated. And it's so interesting that this is not where the Trinity is formed. For that, we need the god of life. And how is he born? Well, the god of the sky mates with the goddess of the earth. In scientific terms, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, basically gases, react with the most abundant solid element on Earth, carbon. And with that, they form the building blocks of life, which begins in water. Interestingly enough, Enki, the god of life, is mainly the god of water, and he uses water to start creating life on Earth. As the story goes, he took some water from Nammu, the primordial sea, and created the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, the main rivers around which the Sumerian civilization was built. Then he made the soil around the rivers fertile and introduced animals to the area. Soon there were many gods and goddesses walking the earth, and all of them owed their existence to the Sumerian Trinity. Anu, the god of heaven, Enlil, the god of the sky, and Enki, the god of water and life itself. The next chapter turns upwards towards the creation of the heavenly bodies, and the god of the sky, Enlil, mates with the goddess of air to create the moon. And what's wild about this story is how much it parallels with the scientific explanation of the creation of the moon. So, in the story, Enlil mates with a goddess named Ninlil, before both of them end up in the underworld. And ultimately, through struggle and sacrifice, they manage to make it back to the surface and give birth to the moon, which takes its place in the sky. And the crazy thing about this is that the latest science suggests that our moon was actually created by dust and debris that flew off the Earth when it was hit by a Mars-sized planet. The debris got trapped in the Earth's orbit and ultimately formed the moon. Sumerians lived thousands of years before modern science discovered that the moon comes from earthly dust. Yet their scripture tells the story of the moon god being released on Earth and taking its place in the sky. Even if you don't believe that Sumerians had deep scientific knowledge, you have to admire their intuition. They didn't think that they were the center of the universe, like most people assume. It's easy to dismiss ancient cultures as primitive. We take pride in knowing how vast the universe is and how long it existed before we came along. But the Sumerian religion acknowledged that. It didn't start with the creation of man. That happened after the moon god took its place in the sky. Now, the stage was set for the creation of man. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. In most religions being practiced today, man was created as an elevated being. In multiple religions, he was created in the image of God and given the dominion to rule the earth. But in Sumerian mythology, man was created because the gods were tired of doing the hard work of digging ditches and farming. Initially, that was the job of the minor deities, called the Ajiji. The major gods were called the Anunnaki, as they come from Anu, the heaven god. So there was the trinity of Anu, Enlil, and Enki, and under them were the major gods, aka the Anunnaki. And then there were the worker gods called the Ajiji. They did all the hard work for about 3,600 years before revolting against the Anunnaki. The Ajiji basically took over the mines in which they were working, but were ultimately defeated by the Anunnaki. Some gods wanted the Ajiji to be executed, but Anu, the senior-most god in the Trinity, decided to spare them, and he also decided not to send them back to work. But the work had to be done by someone. So, Anu, Enlil, and Enki came up with a plan to create a new species of slaves, whose sole purpose would be to serve the Anunnaki. This is a lot more brutal than current religion's view of humanity. Most religions today venerate humans as the inheritors of God's dominion, but the Sumerians had a much harsher view, that humans were nothing but slaves to an uncaring species of gods. And if you think that's dark, wait till you hear about how the first humans in this story were created. Anu, Enki, and Enlil sacrificed Geshtui, the god of intelligence. Then Ninmah, the birth goddess, took his flesh and blood and mixed it with clay. Then all the gods spat into the mixture. I know things are getting a little freaky, but this is literally how the story goes. Enki, the god of life and also a part of the Trinity, took that mixture and went to the room of fate. Along with him was Nintu, the womb goddess, and her job was to recite magical incarnations over the mixture for a long period of time. As the clay started hardening, Nintu made 14 chunks out of it. She placed 7 to the right, which would go on to become men, and 7 to the left, which would go on to become women. Next, she placed these bits of clay in her body and basically became pregnant. After all, she was the womb goddess. And after 9 months, she gave birth to the first 14 humans. And the most noteworthy thing about these humans is what they were called. The Sumerian name for these early humans was Adamu. Does that ring a bell? It sounds a lot like Adam, the first man in the Bible. But unlike Adam, the creation of Adamu was a group effort, which is very different from what happens in the Bible. In the Sumerian scripture, the gods really seem to view humans as slaves and even playthings, and nothing illustrates that better than Enki's wager. So, right after the creation of the 14 Adamu, the gods get together to celebrate their achievement with a feast. And after a bit of heavy drinking, Enki from the Sumerian Trinity gets into a debate with Ninmah, the birth goddess. And the debate is about who gets to decide the roles of each human. After all, they worked together to create these brand new slaves. And now Enki was saying that he was better suited at assigning jobs to the Adamu. And the birth goddess was like, they wouldn't exist without me, so I should get to pick their jobs. Finally, Enki challenged the birth god to prove his wisdom in assigning jobs. He told her to make the most useless human possible, and that he would still find a place for him in society. And in a very cruel series of events, Ninmah starts creating disabled people on purpose, giving them afflictions and ailments, just to win a bet with Enki. She creates a man with shaking hands. Enki makes him an advisor to the king. She creates a blind man. Enki makes him a storyteller. She creates a man with twisted ankles. Enki places him with metal workers. She makes a woman who cannot give birth. Enki makes her oversee the queen's weavers. She makes a man with neither male nor female genitals. Enki makes him a courtier. So Ninmah is just making humans with serious afflictions and limitations just to win this bet. But things get even darker when Ninmah gives up, and it's Enki's turn to make a useless human. And he really goes overboard, making a premature baby that has shaky hands that keep him from putting food in his mouth. On top of that, the baby has a crushed spine, brittle hips, and bad feet. And as if that was not enough, Enki also gives him the final boss of disabilities, a sealed anus. After that, he told Ninmah to give him a job, which obviously Ninmah could not do. And you can't really blame her, can you? Anyway, Ninmah admitted defeat, and Enki got the privilege of assigning jobs to humans, which for the most part were mining and farming. As you can see, there's not a lot of romance in the Sumerian creation of man. It's clear that the god trifecta of Anu, Enki, and Enlil made humans as a slave species. Now, a lot of people would dismiss this as an outdated belief from an extinct religion. But as you know, the Sumerians got a lot of stuff right that our science is just now catching up to. Stuff like the universe coming out of a single point, the moon forming out of dust from the earth, and life beginning in water. Also, animals existing before humans. If Sumerian scriptures got all of that right, at least in metaphor, then maybe the creation of man and his role is also a metaphor for something. And there are a couple of theories about what that something is. And the wildest one is the gold bug theory. According to this theory, the Sumerian gods who came from the heavens were actually aliens. Heaven does seem to be the metaphor for space after all. It's different from the sky. Now, where did these aliens come from? The hint for that is also in the Sumerian scripture. The gods came from Nibiru, which, according to theorist Zachariah Sitchin, is a planet in our solar with a 3,000-year-long orbit. This planet basically takes 3,000 years to go around our sun, so it's so far away that even our telescopes can't capture it. Doesn't that sound completely made up? Well, here's the crazy thing. NASA has actually accepted that such a planet could exist. astrophysicists are open to such a planet's existence. And Sitchin's theory is that this planet was facing a major climate crisis and needed gold to purify its atmosphere. Gold was abundant on Earth, so they came here to mine gold. After the Ajiji Revolution, they created humans with an innate desire to seek gold. Some proponents of this theory suggest that humans went rogue and the Anunnaki left the Earth, or that they got the gold they needed and they left. Anyway, the most fascinating version of this theory suggests that we are still slaves to these aliens. We just keep hoarding gold and building our entire economies around it. Then, once every few thousand years, these aliens visit our planet and take all that gold from us. Then, they wipe our memory and send us back to the Stone Age. One of the strongest points behind this theory is the fact that the Sumerian scripture literally says that the gods created humans as their slaves, and it wasn't metaphorical slavery. The gods needed humans to do physical work, like mining and farming. Then there's the fact that gold can actually help purify the atmosphere, so the Anunnaki motive to collect gold is all but proven. Finally, you can point to the value of gold across cultures. There's literally no culture where gold was discovered but never valued. For some reason, gold attracts us on a subconscious, almost biological level. Maybe that's because the Anunnaki created us to desire gold. And if you think that theory is dark, wait till you hear the next one. This theory suggests that humans were created by a species that looked like humans. So we were created in God's image, but not because He loves us, but because He wanted to conduct biological experiments on us. Talk about a dark theory. But there are people who believe that, and they don't point to the God of the Bible or any modern religion. They point to the Anunnaki gods of Sumeria. And to be fair, these gods really toyed with humans. That entire Enki's wager story sounded like a cruel chain of biological experiments. Ninmah kept making humans with certain disabilities just to win a game. That said, there is a slightly tamer interpretation of this theory as well. And according to this interpretation, the gods never experimented on us. However, they created us mainly to observe us from a distance. And many religions that are practiced today do acknowledge that we are being watched by God and by angels. All this theory does is put a technological spin on the same concept. So the gods aren't just watching us, they're collecting data. Now, speaking of technological terms, one of my favorite theories is the simulation theory. The idea here is that we live inside some kind of a computer simulation, and that the laws of nature are basically the laws of the program in which we live. One version of this theory suggests that we are physical beings plugged into this virtual reality. The other suggests that we are software designed to perceive ourselves as physical beings. It sounds bizarre, but not as bizarre as some of the observations that scientists have made about our reality. Like the fact that time moves at a different pace depending on your speed, or the fact that the smallest unit of matter is not even solid. Isn't that weird? An atom is not solid, electron not a solid, proton not a solid, neutron not a solid. But the chair you're sitting on that's made up of all this non-solid stuff is solid. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The phone in your hand is made up of atoms. 99% of each atom is empty space. Yet they come together to form the very tangible and touchable phone that is in your hand. All of these are scientific facts, not theories. The theory part is that reality is so wonky because it's basically a computer program. But the question is, how does the Sumerian Trinity tie into this theory? Well, it seems like Anu, Enki, and Enlil were the programmers who created the simulation. They were in charge of separate areas. Anu developed the overall program, and Enki and Enlil worked on different environments within the same program. The Ajiji were the first set of characters they created to mine information, but ended up rebelling. So the next set of 14 Adamu were created to continue that work. The reason some people tie the simulation theory to the Sumerian civilization is our DNA. It uses a sequence of letters to store information, much like a computer program. And guess what? Archaeologists found the double helix structure of the DNA in Sumerian impressions made thousands of years before we discovered DNA or even knew what it was. And speaking of thousands of years, a very mind-bending theory about our lost history comes from Graham Hancock, and it is a theory called the Ancient Apocalypse Theory. It posits that our ancient ancestors were far more advanced than we give them credit for. We believe that they started off in the Stone Age and worked with simple tools, but Hancock says that our ancient ancestors probably had computers and even space travel, that they were just as advanced as us, if not more advanced than us. But then, an ancient apocalypse wiped out all of that progress and technology, and it sent us back to the Stone Age. The evidence of this theory comes from the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is engineered with such precision that even today's technology cannot replicate it. The thing about technology is that it's very easy to wipe out. One solar flare, if it's big enough, can wipe out all electronics. A giant flood can destroy most megastructures. And what would that leave us with? Stories to pass down. Airplanes, telephones, and cameras would all sound like magic if conveyed in a story to a generation that had none of that technology. So, in the ancient apocalypse theory, the Sumerian story of creation is a message from the survivors of the apocalypse. It's a metaphor for our lost history. And the history that we know, humans going from the Stone Age to the modern tech-forward era, it's all round too. We have already done this before the ancient flood sent us back to the Stone Age. And speaking of stories, the convincing piece of evidence for the ancient apocalypse theory is that pretty much every major religion has a flood myth. There's Noah's Ark in the Bible, and the Great Flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Sumeria. Plus, there are references to an ancient flood in the Hindu and Muslim scriptures as well. So many cultures independently recounting the same event strongly suggests that it did happen, and that it affected multiple regions. Also, we've been around for over 300,000 years, and all the progress we have made from the Stone Age to the current tech-forward life happened in the last 5,000 years. That just doesn't add up. Think about it. What's more believable? Story A is that our ancestors, with the same brain size and biology as us, made no technological progress for 295,000 years. Then, suddenly, within 5,000 years, they went from using stone tools to building spaceships. Story B is that in the last 300,000 years, we have progressed forward and backward in technology multiple times. If it takes us 5,000 years to go from the Stone Age to skyscrapers, and we've been around for 300,000 years, it sounds plausible that we've made this progress before, but lost it to a cataclysmic event. So, is this all true? To be honest, all these theories are at best plausible. The ancient apocalypse theory is by nature hard to prove, because it's all about a flood wiping out all evidence of previous technological progress. And while the pyramids are impressive, they're not hard evidence of the kind of technology we have today. Just because we can't explain it doesn't mean that people who built it had laptops and engineering software. That said, I do believe that we've made some progress and lost it multiple times in our history. But to say that we got as advanced as we are today and then lost it all without any hard archaeological proof, That's a little too far-fetched for me. But to many people, it's not far-fetched at all, and they do believe it. I think it's easy to believe because it's still pretty grounded, especially when you compare it to the simulation theory. That one turns us into a computer program. And even if we are all a bunch of software, we just can't accept that, because it goes against our experience. Then there's the theory that goes against our self-respect. Yes, I'm talking about the lab rat theory. I didn't want to believe this, so I couldn't wait to debunk it. But I'll be honest, I didn't find a lot of evidence against it. Its biggest criticism is that the whole theory is based on Sumerian mythology and not physical evidence. But what physical evidence could one have for the motive behind our creation? All ideas about the purpose of humans come from scriptures and mythology, so ultimately, it is a matter of belief, and I'm just not ready to believe that we were created to be lab rats. The other option in the Sumerian mythology isn't much better. It's the gold bug theory, which reduces us to slaves built to mine gold. And the part of it that can be debunked is the whole alien angle. There's no evidence of life outside of Earth. In fact, we've not found any life-supporting planets in our galaxy. NASA is open to a mysterious planet X that is too far from the Earth to be detected. But that doesn't mean that such a planet is inhabited by aliens. But then again, if we had evidence of aliens, then it wouldn't be a theory. It would be a fact. My personal take is that there's a little bit of truth to all of these theories. Humans have been created to be slaves in the past, but those who created them were not aliens, but slave masters who bred, owned, and traded human beings. Humans have been used as lab rats, but not by gods. It was by other humans. And we do live in a simulation, but we weren't trapped in it by a cruel god. We were trapped in a bunch of digital algorithms by other humans who make money off of our attention. See, the Sumerian gods are so terrifying because deep down, we know that every cruel thing we see them doing in our imagination, a human being is capable of doing in reality. And I guess it's way easier to blame them than look inward and say the problem is us. But I won't lie. The fact that a pretty ancient culture can predict some certain aspects of the universe with their primitive tools and it checks out with today's science is something worth considering. Who knows? Maybe the Sumerian gods did exist. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a small YouTube channel, waiting for you to subscribe and share this video.